In the bustling streets of ancient Athens, where philosophy, politics, and art flourished, two distinct worlds existed side by side. One belonged to the respectable wives and daughters of citizens, their lives confined to the domestic sphere. The other, far more liberated yet socially precarious, belonged to the Hetairai and the Pornai, two groups of women whose roles in Greek society were as different as the status they held. The Pornai, or common prostitutes, lived in the shadows of society, working in brothels that lined the port of Piraeus and the darker corners of Athens. Many of them were slaves forced into their profession by their owners, while others were freed women with no other means of survival. Foreigners, too, found themselves in this trade, unable to claim full political rights in the city. Their work was regulated, their earnings dictated by brothel keepers or the state, and their lives were often harsh and unforgiving. Their services were cheap, accessible, and devoid of power, their fates largely beyond their control. It was said that Solon, the great Athenian lawmaker, established state-run brothels to ensure that all men, regardless of wealth, could satisfy their desires. These institutions made prostitution an accepted part of daily life. Yet the Pornai themselves remained outcasts, forever separated from the world of citizen women and the elite. In stark contrast, the Hetairai were women of refinement, intellect, and influence. Unlike the Pornai, they were not simply providers of physical pleasure. They were companions, entertainers, and conversationalists, capable of holding their own in the male-dominated world of symposia. These high-class courtesans were often foreigners or freed women, which granted them freedoms that Athenian wives could never dream of. They learned music, dance, and rhetoric, their wit and beauty, making them sought after by the most powerful men of their time. Among them, Aspasia shone the brightest. More than a mere courtesan, she was the companion of Pericles, the great statesman of Athens. Some whispered that she guided his policies, that her sharp mind and eloquence played a role in shaping the very laws of the city. Then there was Phryne, the famed beauty, who amassed so much wealth that she offered to rebuild the walls of Thebes after their destruction. It was Phryne who stood accused of impiety, her fate hanging by a thread, until, as legend has it, her advocate tore open her garments to reveal her body, arguing that a form so divine could not possibly offend the gods. The judges, awestruck, acquitted her. Lais of Corinth and other legendary Hetairai demanded prices so high that only the wealthiest could afford her company. It was said that Demosthenes himself, the great orator, turned away after hearing her fee, muttering, "I will not buy regret for such a high price." She, like many of her kind, moved among philosophers and rulers, her influence stretching beyond the bedroom and into the corridors of power. Yet for all their freedoms, neither Pornai nor Hetairai could escape the constraints of their status. They could not legally marry Athenian citizens, nor could their children inherit full citizenship. The Periclean citizenship law of 451 BCE ensured that only those born of two Athenian parents could claim the privileges of full civic life. For the children of the common prostitutes, Pornai, it depended on their status. The slave ones depended on the owner, who would either force an abortion or sell the baby as a slave. The free ones had to choose between abandon the child exposure or raise it in poverty. For the children of the high-class courtesans, Hetairai, situation was different depending on the patrons they would interact. They had access to contraceptive methods, herbs, pessaries, or infusions, or to abortion. If a pregnancy occurred, it would depend on the father. A wealthy patron could support raising the child. But as they were not married, typically this often meant a life on the margins unless, of course, their father was wealthy and willing to provide for them. Despite these barriers, some Nothoi illegitimate sons of these women rose to prominence. Themistocles, the great naval commander, and Demosthenes, the famed orator, were both rumored to have had non-citizen mothers. In the end, influence, wealth, and talent often mattered more than the circumstances of one's birth. The lives of these women, whether lowly Pornai or exalted Hetairai, reflected the paradoxes of Greek society. They were both indispensable and marginalized, celebrated and scorned. Through them, the Greeks revealed their deepest contradictions, their reverence for beauty and intellect, their rigid social structures, and their ever-present struggle between power and pleasure. In their stories, we glimpse not only the realities of the past, but also the timeless nature of love, status, and survival in human society.